Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in my series of Lorwyn Eclipsed Commander deck techs. I'm releasing a new Lorwyn Commander deck every Thursday through mid-March when the Ninja Turtle set drops, in addition to my usual Monday Commander deck tech videos. So if you have a request for a specific Lorwyn Eclipsed Commander you'd like to see me build, let me know in the comments below. As you see, today our commander is Ashling Rekindled, the last Flamekin born in Mount Tanafel's fires and burdened with destiny. She was featured in Lorwyn and Shadowmoor's cycles of novels, and went from being a messenger and pilgrim to a force of destruction by absorbing the power of Kolthanor's sapling and the greater elemental being she had been seeking. Her rampage across Shadowmoor came to an end when her powers went to Marilyn rather than Una, and since then, Ashling has repented for her actions and lived nomadically. But I won't speak on her role in the Lorwyn Eclipsed story. It's great, you should read it. Anyway, Ashling is a cool character, and I'm excited to show you what I put together for her. But before we get started, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why it's such a cool card, and why I put it at the head of my deck. So we take about 30 cards and put them toward our game plan. It's what we do at the table and how we try to win. This deck is a little bit different from the typical game plan, but you'll see how it plays out. 30 more cards go towards supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction pieces. I usually run 1 or 2 Wraths, sometimes more if it would play into the game plan, sometimes none at all, but I almost always keep to my floor of 38 lands, so I can make sure I hit my land drops, and I can cast my spells and, play commander. So let's talk about our commander. Ashling Rekindled is a 1/3 legendary elemental sorcerer for 1 and a red. That says whenever this creature enters or transforms into Ashling Rekindled, we may discard a card, and if we do, we draw a card. So, a little bit of rummaging for us. And at the beginning of our first main phase, we can pay a blue mana, and if we do, we transform Ashling into Ashling Rhymebound, who is still a 1/3 legendary elemental, but is now a wizard instead of being a sorcerer. She says whenever this creature transforms into Ashling Rhymebound, and at the beginning of your first main phase, add 2 mana of any one color, spend this mana only to cast spells with mana value 4 or greater. And at the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay a red, and if you do, transform Ashling back into her front side. So notably, when Ashling is already Rhymebound, at the beginning of our first main phase, we will have 2 triggers, adding mana and giving us the option to transform Ashling, but because that mana is only spendable on spells of mana value 4 or greater, we can't use it to transform her. So, as with my Irdu Isalu deck, linked in this video's description, while Ashling's front side is sweet, I mean, after all, who wouldn't want card selection just on demand on your commander? Her backside, her Rhymebound side, is what we're here to do. Adding 2 mana at the start of our first main phase doesn't seem like it makes that much of a difference, especially when it's limited to only big spells, but if that's what your deck is built around, Ashling's ability isn't much different than getting 2 bonus lands into play, and that's Explosive Vegetation, a 4 mana green spell stapled to our commander. But what can you do with 2 mana? Anything you want. Here's how it goes. We make sure we've kept a hand with a red source and a blue source, so we can use the red to get our commander down on turn 2, and use the blue to flip her on our next turn. When we do, she adds 2 mana, meaning we just have to play our land for the turn, and we can already cast a 4-drop on turn 3. And what if that 4-drop is a ramp spell, like a Solemn Simulacrum or a Firemind Vessel? And when we hit our land drop again, now we're rolling in mana. The blue side of us can appreciate how many options we have, opening the way for a variety of strategies. So of course, we follow our red side, which only demands that we double down. We want more mana, fielding more lands and more rocks so our power base grows. Our blue spells interject, inserting some big silly card advantage spells into this, but we're rushing forward faster every turn. Our spells have words like Eruption and Deluge and Ire and Defiance in their names. We have a storm of possibilities before us, and we want them all. And with Ashling, we can have them. Now, sure, being a wellspring of pure, unbridled magical energy is great, but what about the other 3 players at the table who are shuffling their hands and inching their chairs away from us uneasily? Okay, I guess we can try to win against them. We have a selection of burn effects to hit our opponents, and a collection of token makers to fill out our board. About 1/6 of our deck is creatures, most of which are here for value, but many of them also hit pretty hard, I guess. I mean, thinking about life totals and combat math are all well and good, but when you're drunk on phenomenal cosmic power, it's hard to focus on the itty-bitty living space a card game inhabits. But we can, because we can do anything. So we do. We may be one with the universe, but our mind's dilation only gives us more ways of plotting our path to victory. And for all the dangers of direct damage and the backup of making endless tokens, the real way we win is with value. Casting more spells than our opponents, touching more cards and spending more resources and populating our playmat with permanents both perfunctory and profound, it just wins games. And since our power is too great for us to even control, what with us casting spells from our opponent's decks or randomly from our graveyard or our own library, winning looks different every time. And it's all thanks to Ashling, giving us 2 more mana each turn. She single-handedly shifts most of our absurd mana curve down 2 spaces, making a deck packed with huge aspirational spells into reliable, repeatable bombs. Even removing her doesn't put the brakes on us too much, since we used her early game boost to power out ramp pieces we can use to bring her back right away. She is fast, she is fierce, she is flaming, and she is frozen. And all of it is thanks to just 2 more mana. You'll enjoy this deck if, like me, you love those big 5 or more mana do-nothing enchantments that are so much fun but you never get a chance to include all of them. Or if you like the idea of rocketing up the mana curve like it's a half pipe, feeling the exhilaration of hanging in the air and then bringing it back down on your opponents all at once. Maybe a roller coaster is a better analogy. Anyway, as usual, this Moxfield list we're going over today is linked in the video's description. Below it, at the bottom of it I should say, you will find a section called Considering. It's full of cards that I considered putting in this deck and ultimately didn't because it wasn't fitting my game plan. But if you have a bigger budget or a smaller one, if you have a different focus in mind for Ashling, or if you just want to go in a direction that it seems like maybe I was leaning toward but ended up sort of juking away from, then the Considering section is a great place for you to start when you build your own Ashling Rekindled deck. So we're going to begin with kind of a backward section. We're going to talk about our payoffs. These are cards that give us value for doing the things we want to do, which in this deck mostly is casting spells that are non-creature and that are 4 mana or greater. So we're going to start with Enraged Flamecaster, one of the few spells in our deck that's actually lower than 4 mana. So for 2 and a red, we get a 3/2 Elemental Sorcerer from Lorwyn Eclipsed with Reach. It says whenever we cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, this creature deals 2 damage to each opponent. So this is the first example of this. Cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater. It does not say when you spend 4 mana to cast a spell. So that means if we have a way to, evoke a Muldrifter, we're only casting it for its evoke cost, but its mana value is still based on what's printed on it. So we're spending 3 to cast a spell of mana value 4 or greater, and the Enraged Flamecaster will do 2 damage to each opponent. This is kind of an interesting little version of a Gutter Snipe, and plus it's a 3/2 reach for 3, and it's an elemental, which might be relevant to us. Next, from the Final Fantasy Commander decks, we have Hermes, Overseer of Elpis. Don't really know what this is. I'm not a Final Fantasy guy, but seems nice. A little bit of a long neck there, but I won't question Squeenix. Anyway, this is a 2/4 Legendary Elder Wizard for 3 and a blue that says whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we make a 1/1 blue bird creature token with flying and vigilance. So it's not exactly Talrand who makes 2/2 drakes with flying, but these birds have vigilance and it triggers on any non-creature spell as opposed to Talrand who triggers on instants and sorceries only. And whenever we attack with 1 or more birds, we scry 1. So we can attack with our birds, maybe attack and not have them die since they have vigilance, and we can block with them later, and we get a scry from it too. Might as well. Next, we have Longshot Rebel Bowman from the recent Avatar The Last Airbender Eternal set. For 3 and a red, we get a 3/3 Legendary Human Rebel ally with Reach that makes all of our non-creature spells cost 1 less to cast. I don't typically like to run discount effects in my decks these days, but as long as they can hit at least 40 cards in our deck, they're okay. We have over 50 non-creature spells in this deck, so Longshot's helping us out there. However, Longshot also says whenever we cast a non-creature spell, Longshot deals 2 damage to each opponent. So Longshot is also a Gutter Snipe. Plus, this discount doesn't change the mana value of our spells, so we can still use the mana that our commander makes on spells even if we're only having to cast them for 3 mana. Next up, we have a Tanafel Rhyme Speaker. This is an elemental wizard. It's a 2/4 for 3 and a blue, and it says whenever we cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, we draw a card. So a great way in this deck to get repeatable card advantage. This is our Archmage Emeritus for the deck. Since we're not trying to magecraft our way into things, we have a lot of other non-creature spells that aren't instant sorceries, but we care about the mana value 4 or greater more so. And it works on creatures too, I guess. Hey, it's Teapot Slinger from Bloombro next. 3 and a red for a 3/4 Raccoon Warrior with Menace that says whenever we expend 4, this creature deals 2 damage to each opponent. Expend 4 means when we spend our 4th mana to cast spells during a turn. So we have to cast spells with that mana, but probably we're going to be doing that every turn. We've got lots of ways to draw cards. Our commander is giving us 2 mana we can use to do that. So Teapot Slinger is generally a guaranteed 2 damage each turn to our opponents, which could end up being, over the course of 5 turns, like it's reasonable to think, it's done 10 damage to each opponent, so that's 30 damage from just this little, very angry-looking raccoon. For the last time, it's porcelain, not stoneware, you ignorant... Oh, that's pretty good. So, Pyreswipe Hawk is next, also from Bloombro. This is 3 and double red for a 4/4 flying, hasty elemental bird. So, an elemental, worth noting, for things that care about elementals, since we have some of those. Whenever this creature attacks, it gets +X/+O until end of turn, where X is the greatest mana value among artifacts we control. So we do have some artifacts, and some of them are a little bit big. Got quite a few 4-drop artifacts, actually. But it may not matter what our artifacts are, because whenever we expend 6, we gain control of up to 1 target artifact for as long as we control this creature. So again, this is caring about us expending mana. If we can spend 6 mana on spells during our turn, which we often can, we can steal an artifact. It doesn't have to be a huge artifact, but if it is, it gives the Pyreswipe Hawk a big bonus when it attacks. But if we steal someone's Soul Ring, that's pretty good too. Next we have Tella, Great Sage. This is from Final Fantasy's main set. 3, a blue and a red for a 3/3 legendary human wizard that says whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we make a 1/1 colorless hero token. Alright. So another token generating effect for us. But if 4 or more mana were spent to cast that spell, we draw 2 cards. So if we cast any non-creature spell in our deck, or almost all of them rather, we turn them into a divination as well. And if 8 or more mana was spent to cast that spell, sacrifice Tella and it deals that much damage to each opponent. So Tella can just sort of explode and do at least 8 to everyone. Now it's worth noting that this does not say if the spell you cast was mana value 4 or greater. We have to actually spend 4 or more mana on it. So if we have something like Longshot giving us a discount, and we only have to spend 3 mana on, let's say, Tanafel Rhymespeaker, then Tella, I guess it's got to be a non-creature spell, but you'll get it. Shark Typhoon, let's say. If we are able to cast Shark Typhoon for less than 4 mana somehow, Tella is not going to have that second part of the trigger, where we would draw the cards. However, it is notable that all we have to do is cast the non-creature spell, and we get this 1/1 hero no matter what. If that non-creature spell if we spent 4 or more mana on it, we get the hero and we draw 2 cards. And if that happened to be 8 or more mana, we get the hero, we draw 2 cards, and Tella explodes and burns everyone. So yeah, interesting different ways for our deck to work. Some of them care about the actual mana value, some of them care about the actual amount of mana we spend. It's worth watching and checking yourself for each one. Next up is Shark Typhoon. 5 and a blue for an enchantment that says whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we make an XX blue shark creature token with flying, where X is that spell's mana value. Again, we're back to the mana value, not what we spent on it. We can get a lot of sharks this way, and we will. And they all fly, so great ways to swing in, and great ways for us to block. Since we've got big creatures, and they can block flyers since they fly themselves. Shark Typhoon also, however, has cycling for X1 and a blue. Meaning while it's in our hand, we can spend 1 in a blue and discard it to draw a card. And if X is greater than 0, we're going to get to keep a shark from it, because whenever we cycle this card, we make an XX blue shark creature token with flying. So the idea is, we can just spend 1 in a blue, discard this, draw a card. We will make a shark, but it'll be an 00, a 0/0, and it'll die. But if we spent any more mana than just the 2, we just pump that in here, and we get a shark that's, if X is a 3, it'll be a 3/3 shark. Notably, cycling is not casting a spell. Cycling is activating an ability on this card, which means we can't use our commander's mana, the mana that Ashling Rhymebound makes for the Shark Typhoon cycling ability, but we sure can for Shark Typhoon itself, which is a better use of our mana anyway, unless we're just desperate for cards. Next, we have Sunbird's Invocation. I'm always excited when I can run this in a deck. 5 and a red for an enchantment that says whenever we cast a spell, we reveal the top X cards of our library, where X is that spell's mana value. As long as we're casting the spell from our hand. We do have to be casting it, and it does have to be from our hand, but it's any spell. Creatures, non-creatures, whatever. We reveal the top X, where X is the spell's mana value, and we can cast a spell with mana value X or less from among the cards we revealed without paying its mana cost. And then we put the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. So, again, if we're casting that spell without paying its mana cost, that's not going to be helping our Pyreswipe Hawk or our Teapot Slinger, but it sure can affect things like Tenafel Rhyme Speaker. We're still casting it. If it has a mana value 4 or greater, we draw a card. Shark Typhoon, we're still casting this non-creature spell if that's what we have Sunbird's Invocation cascaded into. So if it's a non-creature spell, we're still going to get a shark for that second one. So this turns most of our spells into another spell. Yeah, pretty good. Finally, even more tokens is Ovika Enigma Goliath. This is from Phyrexia All Will Be One, but it was reprinted in Foundations, so it shouldn't be hard to find. 5, a blue and a red for a 6/6 legendary Phyrexian Nightmare. Obviously it is. It has flying and it has ward, pay 3 mana and 3 life. So annoying to try and get rid of for this 6/6 flyer for 7. And it says whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we make a number of 1/1 red Phyrexian Goblin creature tokens equal to the mana value of that spell. They gain haste until end of turn. So we cast Shark Typhoon, and we get 6 goblins as well. That seems pretty good. So those are our payoffs. Let's take a look at the ways that I mentioned we're going to be burning out our opponent. Even though our first one is more of a removal spell than burn, but we can use it however we want. It's Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt is a single red for an instant that does 3 damage to any target. A classic, it was in alpha, we want to run this in every red deck we can, because it still puts in work, and creatures are getting more efficient, even if it's a little slow. So, like, how many creatures are like an X3, or 2 or 1? Lots of them. And you don't have to run the Mystical Archive printing. It's just one of my favorites. But yeah, all lightning bolts are good lightning bolts. Bring out your Krish Rushes. We've seen the Enraged Flamecaster. It will burn our opponents whenever we cast a spell mana value 4 or greater. Chandra Torch of Defiance is 2 and double red for a 4 loyalty Chandra Planeswalker with 4 abilities, and is amazing. +1 is exile the top card of our library. We can cast that card, and if we don't, Chandra deals 2 damage to each opponent. That means if it's not a spell, we can't cast it, so Chandra's just going to do 2 damage to each opponent. And we may cast that card. It does not say until the end of your turn, or until your next end step, or anything like that, until your next turn's end step. It means right then. And it does not say without paying its mana cost. So we exile the top card, and we are allowed to pay for and cast it right then if it's a spell. And if we don't, it's just going to stay in exile, and Chandra will burn every opponent for 2 damage. We can also +2 her to add 2 red mana. So this is sort of like one of those 4 mana rocks that I mentioned earlier. 4 mana ramp spells, just it's one that can be attacked. But Chandra being able to add 2 extra mana every turn on top of the 2 mana we're getting from Ashling Rhymebound, that's before we've tapped any of our lands. We've already got 4 mana in our pool. Very good. We can have Chandra do 4 damage to target creature if we -3 her, and if we get her up to the point where we can ultimate her, -7 is we get an emblem with whenever we cast a spell, any spell, this emblem deals 5 damage to any target. Any target. So that's burning our opponents or removing our opponent's creatures. Next up we have Court of Embereth. I really like these Wilds of Eldraine commander, technically they're commander cards. They're from the commander set, but they're actually from the set boosters and collector boosters. These are really cool. So for 2 and double red, we get an enchantment that when it enters, we become the Monarch. Now what is the Monarch? The Monarch is a special rule that only has 2 rules associated with it. If you are the Monarch, you draw a card at your end step. At the beginning of your end step, draw a card if you're the Monarch. That's all that rule is. The other rule is, if a player does combat damage to the Monarch, that player becomes the Monarch. So if you are the Monarch and someone does combat damage to you with one of their creatures, now they are the Monarch. And why would they want to be the Monarch? Well, because the first rule says during their end step, they get to draw a card. So the monarchy tends to pass around the table. People tend to put their focus on whoever is the Monarch for when it comes to attacking because they want that extra card. It's a great way to keep things moving at the table during a commander game. So Court of Embereth just makes you the Monarch. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you make a 3/1 red knight creature token. And then if you're the Monarch, this enchantment deals X damage to each opponent where X is the number of creatures you control. Now that may not be that much in this deck, especially early on. But we saw Okiva making 1/1 goblins for equal to the mana value, a number of those goblins equal to the mana value of whatever non-creature spell we're casting. We've got Shark Typhoon making a new one every time we cast a non-creature spell. And these knights don't just go away. So at the very least, at the beginning of our upkeep, if we're still the Monarch, we make a knight and we're pinging each opponent for 1. That seems okay to me. Plus, drawing cards off the monarchy. Why not? We've seen Longshot. Longshot burns our opponents like a gutter snipe every time we cast a non-creature spell. Teapot Slinger does the same thing when we expend 4. Court of Ire is a different kind of court than the Court of Embereth, because this is from the Lord of the Rings commander decks. 3 and double red for an enchantment that says when it enters, you become the Monarch. So interestingly, the only way to become the Monarch rather than to attack the Monarch and do combat damage to them is to have something enter that says you become the Monarch. So we can just steal the monarchy back from someone by playing Court of Ire if we want. And it says at the beginning of our upkeep, this enchantment deals 2 damage to any target. So that could be a removal spell. We can hit planeswalkers, creatures, or our opponents. And if we're the Monarch, it deals 7 damage instead. That's just a kill spell for a lot of things on the board, and it might be for one of our opponents as well. Next is Fury. Amazingly, only like less than $5 since it's banning in Modern. Amazing. Banning in Modern? Yep. Rough. Fury is an elemental incarnation. It's a 3/3 double striker for 3 and double red. It says when it enters, it deals 4 damage divided as we choose among any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers. So we can just burn creatures and planeswalkers with this for 4. Pretty good. In addition, we can evoke it by exiling a red card from our hand. Evoke means it enters the battlefield and gets a trigger that causes it to be sacrificed. So if we want to just remove something with this, we can by just exiling another red card from our hand. Fury will enter, it will do its enters trigger, and then it will just die. But generally in this deck, it's so easy for us to get up to 5 mana that playing out a 3/3 double striker that burns our opponent's creatures and planeswalkers right away seems pretty good. Next up, we've seen Tella. Tella can burn our opponents if we cast something that's 8 mana or more and a non-creature spell, which we have some of. Combustible Gearhulk is next. This is 4 and double red for a 6/6 artifact creature construct with first strike that says when it enters, target opponent, we get to choose who, may have us draw 3 cards. It might just come with a free Ancestral Recall. And if that player doesn't, we mill 3 cards, and then this creature deals damage to that player equal to the total mana value of those cards. As you've already seen, we have a lot of expensive cards in this deck. So much of the time, like our mana value, our average mana value of the deck is so high, this is going to be doing quite a bit of burn damage to that opponent when our Gearhulk comes in, and we've got a 6/6 first striker. Most of our opponents are going to know that, so they might just let us draw those 3 cards. That seems good too. Finally is one of our Wraths. We have Soulfire Eruption. 6 and triple red, which is enough to make Tella Great Sage explode. On top of being a sorcery that says choose any number of target creatures, planeswalkers, and or players. So what we do is we target every creature, planeswalker, and opponent. For each of them, we exile the top card of our library, and Soulfire Eruption deals damage equal to that card's mana value to that permanent or player. And we may play those exiled cards until the end of our next turn. So we've got this turn to do it, which maybe we still have some mana left over, even though we just cast a 9 mana spell. But we can also do it next turn. So this sort of draws us a bunch of cards. and probably wraths most of the board, maybe even one or two of our opponents in the process. Seems good. So those are our burn spells. We talked a little bit more about our other payoff, which is tokens, other major payoff, I guess. So we'll talk about these now. As we've seen, Court of Embereth at the beginning of our upkeep makes us a 3/1 red knight creature token. We have the other court in these colors, which is Court of Vantress. 2 and double blue for an enchantment that, again, when it enters, we become the monarch. And at the beginning of our upkeep, we choose up to one other target enchantment or artifact. It does not say that we control, but we have a lot of good ones, so we might just do that. If we're the monarch, we make a token that's a copy of it, and if we're not the monarch, we can have Court of Vantress become a copy of it, except it has this ability. Meaning, essentially, we get a token that sticks around if we're the monarch, or we get one that doesn't stick around because it will do this again next turn. But maybe it will stick around in the sense that we'll just have Court of Vantress keep copying the same thing and keep being that. But if we are the monarch, we get to add more token copies of things to the battlefield, and that's even better. So yeah, very nice. Hermes, we've already seen, makes birds for us when we cast non-creature spells. Ashling's Command is next. This is 3, a blue and a red, for a kindred instant elemental. Notable if we are casting something that cares about elemental spells, not just elemental creature spells. I don't know that we have anything like that in the deck, but we'll see. So we get to choose 2. We either make a token that's a copy of target elemental we control. We could hit our commander with this, but she is legendary, so we have several other elementals we probably want to hit instead. Target player draws 2 cards, pretty good. Ashling's Command deals 2 damage to each creature target player controls, so this is our second Wrath in the deck. Or target player makes 2 treasures. Making 2 treasures, in a deck like this, it feels like, why should we need to do that? Well, but why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we want to make more and more treasures and have more and more mana for our huge things later on? But making copies of elementals is good. Being able to burn out everything that's an X2 or smaller on an opponent's board, or just drawing 2 cards, is always useful. So even if we use this just to draw 2 and make 2 treasures, that's still a pretty good use of our time, especially because with the mana that Ashling makes for us, we're only ending up spending 3 more mana on this. So 3 mana at instant speed to draw 2 cards, that's quick study. And we get 2 treasures in the process, so we're getting a rebate, so we only really spent 1 mana? Pretty good. Primordial Mist is next. This card it does not make tokens, but it gives us temporary creatures, so I put it in the token section just to be clear about why it's here. So Primordial Mist is an enchantment for 4 and a blue that says at the beginning of our end step, we may manifest the top card of our library. That means we take the top card of our library, we put it face down as a 2/2 creature, we can look at it, but it's face down, and it's a 2/2 creature on our board. We can turn it face up at any time by paying its mana cost if it's a creature card. So a lot of the time in this deck, it's not going to be a creature card. We can get a sneaky creature in sometimes. Maybe we have, we attack with our 2/2, and then surprise, we pay 4 and double red, and it's a Tali Primal Storm. But most of the time, we're not going to be able to flip it over since it's not a creature card. I do want to make mention, though, even if we are flipping it over and into a creature, and that creature itself is mana value 4 or greater, we can't use our commander's mana that Ashling Rhinebound makes to do that, because that mana is meant for casting spells, not for activating abilities, and unmorphing something is an activated ability. However, we can exile a face-down permanent we control face up, and we can play that card this turn. So if we end up, at the beginning of our end step, we manifest a land into play. Well, we've got a 2/2, and then during our next turn, we exile that 2/2 face up. Now it's a land that we can play, it doesn't say cast, from exile. So we can play that as our land drop for the turn. If it was a spell, a non-creature spell, we can play that this turn. So in a way, this is a roundabout way of us drawing a new card during each of our end steps. And we know what it is. It's just sitting there as a 2/2. We may want to use it as that 2/2, or we may want to cast it later on, or both. Seems good. Next up is Replication Technique. This is 4 and a blue for a sorcery that makes a token that's a copy of target permanent we control. We have to control it, but it's any permanent. So we can make a copy of a land with this if we want to. We can make a copy of one of our big enchantments, maybe even something like Primordial Mist, make a second one of those. What's especially cool about Replication Technique is it has Demonstrate, which means when we cast this, we can just choose to copy it. And if we do, we choose an opponent and they have to copy it as well. It doesn't say may for them. And then of course everyone can choose new targets for the copies, that is. So the way this works is if we demonstrate it, we get to have 2 replication techniques after our opponent's replication technique resolves. Because replication technique's original goes on the stack, its demonstratability triggers. If we copy it, that copy will go on the stack above the original, and whatever opponent we choose will also copy it, and their copy will go on the stack above our copy. So then theirs resolves, our copy resolves, and our original one resolves. However, it is worth noting, it says target. So as soon as any of these things go on the stack, targets have to be chosen. So we can't wait to hear what someone else is targeting for us to choose our own. Anyway, that's replication technique, and I think it's pretty cool. Originally from the Commander 21 Strixhaven decks. I'm excited to go back to Strixhaven. What can I say? Tella makes 1/1 heroes every time we cast a non-creature spell. Extravagant Replication, originally from Streets of New Capenna, is Streets of New Capenna Commander, I believe. 4 and double blue for an enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of another target non-land permanent you control. So it's the same thing Replication Technique does every upkeep for 1 more mana. Seems pretty good. This was also printed in Foundations, I believe, in the Foundations Starter Collection, so also easy to find. Yeah, lots of fun. The only thing you can't target is itself, but still. We've seen Shark Typhoon. Shark Typhoon, of course, makes these token sharks. Will of the Teamer is next. This is one of our sorceries. It's 5 and a blue for a sorcery that says choose one. If you control a commander as you cast this spell, you may choose both instead. So make a token that's a copy of target permanent. Doesn't have to be one we control, except it's a 4/4 dragon creature with flying in addition to its other types. So we can make a 4/4 dragon that is also, an extravagant replication, or a primordial mist, or a shark typhoon, or just a shark, or one of our lands. It can just be any permanent. And target player draws cards equal to the greatest mana value among permanents we control. So we can have someone else draw cards if we really want to. But probably we're going to want to draw these cards, and getting a lot of cards since our mana values are pretty high is a great use of this spell, even if we don't have our commander in play and we don't want this dragon. So yeah. Kiora Best's the Sea God, one of my very favorite sagas. This is 5 and double blue for an enchantment saga. If you haven't seen sagas before, the way this works is when it comes in, and at the start of your first main phase, you put a lore counter on it. Whenever it has a number of lore counters, a new number of lore counters, basically, you trigger the chapter that you haven't seen yet that's equal to that. And then after the third ability is resolved, you sacrifice the saga. So it first comes in, it gets a lore counter, and we make an 8/8 blue Kraken creature token with hexproof. An 8/8 hexproof for 7 is already pretty good. On our next turn, at the start of our main phase, we get Chapter 2. And we tap all non-land permanents that target opponent controls, and they don't untap during their controller's next untap step. Most notably, that does hit, their planeswalkers and their enchantments, but also their artifacts, and most importantly, their creatures. So that means they're completely tapped down until not just their next turn, but the turn after that. So if we have the ability to attack in, or if someone else at the table does, we can sure be political about this, since this is telegraphed. We know that this is going to happen once Kiora Best the Sea God comes in. This is going to happen the turn after it comes in. So maybe opponent A, we're like, hey, if you leave us alone for a turn, I'll make it so you can take out opponent B. And we do it with this. Good deal. Finally, Chapter 3 is we gain control of target permanent and opponent controls, and we untap it. That could be a land. But in all likelihood, we want to do something scarier, like their commander, their biggest bomb, even their Soul Ring would be fine. Just take something from an opponent, untap it, it can be one of these things that's still tapped. Very nice. Lots of value from Kiora. Ovika, we've already seen, makes a bunch of 1/1 Phyrexians for us, those goblins. And we have a room card from Duskmourn. If you haven't seen these rooms before, the way this works is this. This is a split card where both sides are a permanent. They're both enchantments. So these halves are called doors. The idea is you pick one door and you cast that. Like, let's say we're casting Mirror Room. That means we'll cast, for 2 and a blue, an enchantment that when it enters, we unlock this door. And when it unlocks, so when it enters, we make a token that's a copy of a target creature we control, except it's a reflection in addition to its other creature types. That permanent in play is just called Mirror Room, but it has a special ability. We can unlock the other door at sorcery speed by paying its casting cost. So if we unlock Fractured Realm, this card is now called Mirror Room Fractured Realm, and it has the text of both sides on it. Fractured Realm's side is 5 and a double blue that says if a triggered ability of a permanent we control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. This is crazy powerful with our commander, because our commander, when she's Rime-bound, has 2 at the beginning of your first main phase turns, which means she's going to have both of those abilities trigger twice. We will ignore the 2 that have us transform her, and we will take advantage of the 2 that give us mana. So we'll end up with 4 mana to start each of our turns every turn. Pretty sweet, in addition to all of our other triggers. So we can play Fractured Realm first if we want to play it for 7, and then hang out and trigger Mirror Room, which is very nice because Mirror Room is a triggered ability. Meaning if we cast Fractured Realm first, it doesn't say another permanent, so Mirror Room for 2 and a blue will make 2 copies of creatures, then make them into reflections. So yeah, Fractured Realm coming out first doesn't happen in most decks, but in ours, it's not out of our reach. So that covers all of our tokens in our tokens section. I want to go over a few supplemental cards in this deck because this is most of our game plan, but a lot of our game plan actually lives in our vegetables, in these support sections. So we're going to go through these support sections now. We're going to start with our card advantage section, which I've just tagged, as usual, as draw. It doesn't mean this all draws us a card, like the draw action. It just gives us access to more cards. And as you see, there's a lot of cards in it because they cross over with other parts of our deck. So we're going to start with the one card in this section that we can't use the mana from our commander's backside to cast, Flame of Anor. This is 1, a blue, and a red. For an instant, this says choose 1, but if you control a wizard as you cast the spell, you may choose 2 instead. Ashling Rekindled, her front side, is a sorcerer, but Ashling Rime-bound is a wizard. Important to note. So if we cast Flame of Anor with Ashling Rime-bound face up, we can't use the mana she gives us for it, but we can sure choose 2 of these instead. So we can choose target player draws 2 cards, destroy target artifact, or Flame of Anor does 5 damage to target creature. So it's removal, or it's draw. Pretty good. Probably 2 of them, and I bet one of these is going to be this one. Big Score is next. Love Big Score. This is the best one of these 4 mana Tormenting Voice effects that comes with 2 treasures. 3 and a red. For an instant, as an additional cost, we discard a card, and we draw 2 cards, and we make 2 treasures. Pretty great. Just Streets of New Capenna doing us right. We've seen Chandra, Torture Defiance. Chandra can draw us cards by having us exile the top card of our library and give us the ability to cast it right then. It's not a perfect card advantage effect, but similar. Court of Embereth makes us the Monarch, so at the very least, that turn, or during our end step, we're going to draw a card. Same is true of Court of Vantress. Deep Analysis is next. This is 3 and a blue. For a sorcery, target player draws 2 cards. So a little bit of an expensive divination on us. However, we can flash it back for 1 and a blue and paying 3 life. Meaning, we can use our commander's mana to cast this normally. We can also use our commander's mana to cast it for its flashback cost, because its flashback cost is a mana cost, and its mana value is still based on what's printed at the top right. So we can just flash this back for essentially just 3 life, plus of course that mana, and draw 2 more cards. Pretty sweet. Fact or Fiction is next. We love Fact or Fiction, and we got to use the Dominaria printing with gorgeous Joyra and also gorgeous Slimefoot. 3 and a blue for an instant that says reveal the top 5 cards of your library. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles, and we put 1 pile in our hand and the other pile into our graveyard. Just a fun little mini game that we get to maybe get 3 cards out of for 4 mana. Maybe we get 2. Maybe we get 4. Who knows? Maybe we get 1. Next up is Hedron Archive. This is 4 generic mana for an artifact that taps for 2 colorless mana. So this is one of our mana rocks. It's an artifact that taps for mana. We can also, however, pay 2, tap, and sack it to draw 2 cards. So it's sort of like a double Mind Stone. We're not running Mind Stone because it's 2 mana. We are running Hedron Archive because it's at least 4 mana, so we can put our commander's mana toward it. Johan's Stopgap from Wilds of Eldraine is next. This is a little bit of a pet card of mine, but I think it's a very cool one. This is 3 and a blue for a sorcery that says return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand and draw a card. So this is a little bit like a kicked version of Into the Royal, which is in Standard and in Foundations. However, this costs 2 less to cast if it's bargained, and it has bargain, which means as we cast it, we can sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token. So we have plenty of artifacts and enchantments in this deck. Usually we don't want to sacrifice them, but we do have token versions of them that we make, and we have token creatures as well. So it's possible to cast Johan's Stopgap for 1 and a blue if we just bargain it. But its mana value remains 4, so that 1 and a blue can be paid with the mana that our commander makes. Ashling Rhinebound, if we make, a couple blue, we get to Johan's Stopgap, having sacrificed, let's say, one of those Phyrexian Goblin creature tokens, to bargain it, and we get to bounce something and draw a card in the process. Just a lot of fun. Even if we just have to hard cast this rather than bargain it, we're still getting to put Ashling's mana toward it, and we get a removal spell and a card draw. Next is Kumina's Awakening from Rivals of Ixalan. 2 and double blue for an enchantment with Ascend. Ascend means once this is in play, if at any point we control 10 or more permanents, we have the City's Blessing, and we get that for the rest of the game. The City's Blessing doesn't have an inherent meaning, it's just used by this card, but as long as, even if we lose Kumina's Awakening, or we otherwise drop down below 10 or more permanents, we always keep the City's Blessing. We just don't care about it unless we have a card that has Ascend. So, Kumina's Awakening, if we have the City's Blessing, rather, at the beginning of our upkeep, each player draws a card. See, we're a group hug deck. But if we have the City's Blessing, instead only we draw a card. So this is a little bit of a Phyrexian arena for us, but it's got the right mana value for us to cast it with our commander's mana, and eventually it becomes good for just us, rather than everyone. Memory Deluge is next from Midnight Hunt. This is 2 and double blue for an instant that says look at the top X cards of your library where X is the amount of mana spent to cast this spell. Again, one of these, kind of like our expend spells, where it actually matters what amount of mana we're spending. Just worth remembering. So we look at the top that many cards of our library and we put 2 in our hand and the rest on the bottom in a random order. We can flash it back for 5 and double blue, meaning we can pay 7 and look at 7 cards, assuming we're not discounted on it. And when we flash it back, since it still has a mana value of 4, we can use that mana from Ashling, Rhinebound, to pay that flashback cost. Next we have Pirate's Pillage. This is a card that I don't see people run that often because it's not as good as the red versions, I think. In general, people think it's not as good as the red versions. Maybe it's just because it's not very good in blue compared to all the other blue draw spells you have. This is 3 and a blue for a sorcery that says draw 2 cards and make a treasure. So it's sort of like Big Score. It only makes 1 treasure, but it doesn't require us to discard a card in the process. So while there are 2 other versions of Big Score that are not as good, one that's an instant but it costs 2 and double red, and one that's a sorcery that costs 3 and a red. The sorcery is Pirate's Pillage. The instant is Unexpected Windfall. But I went with Pirate's Prize because it's blue, which helps us because our deck is slightly more blue. It doesn't require us to lose a card in the process, so it is card advantage. And it only makes 1 more treasure, but we're not really hurting for mana in this deck, so we don't really need the rebate that much. I would rather get 1 fewer treasures and get 1 more card overall, since we don't have to discard 1. So yeah, Pirate's Prize is in here for that. Oh, here's Unexpected Windfall. I was just talking about it. We are running it, of course, because why not run more of these? It's exactly the same as Big Score, except it has a different mana cost. We haven't seen the Solemn Simulacrum, but I did mention it. 4 generic mana for a 2/2 artifact creature golem. When it enters, we may Rampant Growth, which is search our library for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So we can get one of our many, many basics that we're running in this deck directly into play, so we have access to more mana even next turn. And when this dies, we can draw a card. Seems good to me. Great card to make copies of as well. Stone Speaker Crystal is next. This is 4 generic mana for an artifact that taps for 2 colorless mana, much like we already saw with our Hedron Archive. We can also pay 2, tap, and sacrifice it to exile any number of target players' graveyards and draw a card. So we can draw a card off of this. It's not really what it's in here for, but we have the opportunity and we can hose our opponent's graveyard strategies in the process. TNFL Rhyme Speaker, we've already seen, draws us cards when we cast spells mana value 4 or greater. Already spoke about Unexpected Windfall, and Ashling's Command gives us the ability to draw 2 from it. Court of Ire makes us the Monarch, so we're going to draw at least 1 card off of it. And I did already mention our Mold Drifter. For 4 and a blue, we have a 2/2 Elemental. It's an Elemental, worth remembering, with flying. And when it enters, we draw 2 cards. We can also evoke it for 2 and a blue. So we cast this for its evoke cost. It's still a mana value 5, so we can use our commander's mana on this and only have to tap like 1 land to draw 2 cards. But we'd love to spend 3 mana on it, plus the 2 from our commander, and get a 2/2 flyer as well. Just a Wind Drake that draws us 2 cards and is an elemental. Very nice. Primordial Mist we've seen, and I've talked about how this is sort of slow card advantage, letting us manifest the top card of our library, and then whenever we feel like we want to play that card, we can just exile it using Primordial Mist face up and then play it. Telegreat Sage lets us draw 2 cards whenever we spend 4 or more mana to cast a non-creature spell. Combustible Gearhulk probably draws us 3 cards if one of our opponents doesn't want to take a bunch of damage. I mentioned Atali Primal Storm. Well, here they are. 4 and double red for a 6/6 Legendary Elder Dinosaur. And when Atali attacks, we exile the top card of each player's library. That's ours as well. And we can cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana costs. That means right away, right in this moment, as part of the resolution of this ability. So we might get 4 lands and just totally whiff. Or we might get 4 spells. And maybe some of those spells are mana value 4 or greater, which means we're going to be triggering things like the TNFL Rhyme Speaker. You never know. Or Shark Typhoon. Shark Typhoon, of course, we can draw a card from it when we cycle it, if we want to cycle it. Sunbird's Invocation gives us a second spell, often, when we cast a spell from our hand. Triple Triad is next. I was a little diminishing about playing card games back in my Heart of the Deck, but here's another card game we can play from the Final Fantasy set. 3 and triple red for an enchantment that says at the beginning of our upkeep, each player exiles the top card of their library. Until end of turn, we can play the card we exiled this way and each other card exiled this way with a lesser mana value than it without paying their mana costs. So this is a card that's great in decks that have a lot of high mana value cards like ours. So at the very least, we can just, for free, cast the spell on top of our library if we have a spell. And if it happens to be higher mana value than anything else of our opponents, we get to cast those for free as well. And we can do them anytime during the turn, as opposed to what Itali does, which we have to cast them all at once. Trumpeting Carnosaur is next. This is 4 and double red for a 7/6 Trampling Dino. Look at this dino. What's going on in the background? Why are you trampling when you should be leaving? Anyway, when it enters, we discover 5. Discover is this. You exile cards from the top of your library until you find a spell mana value 5 or less. You can then either cast it or put it in your hand, and all the other cards you exiled go on the bottom of your library in a random order. It's sort of like a fixed cascade. So Trumpeting Carnosaur finds us a spell that we can either cast or put in our hand, and so that's card advantage for us. We can also pay 2 and a red and discard the Carnosaur while it is in our hand to have it deal 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. So this is modal in a way for us. It's a 7/6 Trampler that also finds us another spell and lets us cast it or draw it, or it's a removal spell for cheaper. Obviously, this is activating an ability rather than casting a spell, so we can't use Ashling Rhymebound's mana to do this, but we sure can for this. Will of the Teamer, we've already seen. One of the options is letting us draw cards equal to the greatest mana value among permanents we control. Kiorobest's the Sea God does not draw us a card, but it does steal an opponent's target permanent, so that's giving us a little something. I mentioned Mind's Dilation in passing. Well, here it is. It's 5 and double blue for an enchantment. This is whenever an opponent casts their first spell each turn. Just their first spell, but it's any opponent, and it's each turn. That means if opponent A casts their first spell during their turn, this triggers. And then if opponent A casts a spell on opponent B's turn, or on our turn, this triggers again. It's every opponent during each turn. And when that happens, that player will exile the top card of their library, and if it's not a land, we can cast it without paying its mana cost. Again, right away. We don't have a time period specified, so it's part of the resolution of this ability. Very cool. Lots and lots of extra spells for us. Wondrous Crucible is next. This is a really sweet card from the Brothers War Commander decks. This is 7 generic mana for an artifact that gives all of our permanents, including our commander and our lands, and itself, Ward 2. And at the beginning of our end step, we mill 2 cards, and we exile a non-land card at random from our graveyard. We copy it, and we can cast a copy without paying its mana cost. So we get a free something as long as we have any spells in our graveyard. The best way to do this generally is, assuming you're not playing with someone who has a deck that cares about graveyard order, you take all your land cards in your graveyard, set them aside, take the other ones, shuffle them face down, and have someone else at the table pick one. That gets exiled, and you make a copy of it. A lot of times people will just take the original and pull it halfway out of the sleeve and put it into play to represent that it's a token copy. Assuming it was a permanent. But yeah, Wondrous Crucible gives us a lot of extra value in these ways. Recursively. Aminatus Augury is next. Love Aminatu. What a cool character. 6 and double blue for a sorcery that exiles the top 8 cards of our library. We can put a land card from among them onto the battlefield. Does not say tapped. And then until end of turn, for each non-land card type, we can cast a spell of that type from among the exiled cards without paying its mana cost. Another way to do things for free. Isn't it amazing how many cards we have in this deck that cast spells for free for us when what our deck does is ramp? So we can do even more casting. So each non-land card type means we can cast 1 creature, 1 artifact, 1 enchantment, etc., etc. But if we were to see Etali Primal Storm and Solemn Simulacrum, we could cast both of those because we had to cast Etali as our creature and the Sad Robot as our artifact. So it's not like we're only limited to 1 of each non-land type. It's that we get to choose a card of each non-land type and cast it. Next up, we have one with the multiverse, something else I also referred to back in the heart of the deck. 6 and double blue for an enchantment that lets us look at the top card of our library at any time, and lets us play lands and cast spells from the top of our library. Playing lands and casting spells from the top of our library is card advantage. It's one more thing in our hand that refreshes itself every time we do that thing. In addition, once during each of our turns, we can cast a spell from our hand or from the top of our library without paying its mana cost. More free spells. Yeah, I had an opponent play this against me during the Brothers War pre-release. I did not win that game. We've seen Soulfire Eruption. It puts a lot of cards in exile that we can cast until the end of our next turn, plus doing a bunch of damage to our opponent's creatures, planeswalkers, and themselves. Next, we have Charred Foyer and Warped Space. This is another room card. So the Charred Foyer is 3 in a red that lets us exile the top card of our library at the beginning of our upkeep, and we are able to play it this turn. So it says play, so we can play lands from it if we want. It also lets us do it this turn. So that's a specified time period, so we don't have to do it at any point during the turn. Specifically, we don't have to do it right away. We can do it whenever we want during that turn. Warped Space is the alternative. For 4 and double red, once each turn, you may pay 0 mana rather than pay the mana cost for a spell we cast from exile. So that works well with this. If we have cards in exile from Charred Foyer, or a card from exile even, we can cast it for just 0 mana rather than its mana cost. It retains its mana value, so anything that might trigger from that is relevant. But yeah, we've got these options. Something else that's great for this, cards that are in exile that we might want to cast, are the cards from Soulfire Eruption. Choose whichever one we like best from that. The most expensive one, we cast that. Finally, we have Commit to Memory. Commit to Memory is an Aftermath card, which means we can only cast Commit, or we can cast Commit from basically anywhere we're allowed to cast it from, like our hand, or if we've exiled it or something. Memory has the Aftermath keyword, which means it can only be cast from our graveyard, and when we do, we exile it. So the way this works is typically you cast Commit, which is 3 and a blue, for an instant that puts a spell or an on-land permanent onto its owner's library, second from the top, or into its owner's library. The fact that this can target a spell means we can hit things on the stack with this, so we can protect ourselves almost like a counter spell. But it doesn't remand it, putting the spell back in their hand, it puts it second from the top of their library, which is pretty sweet. Hitting someone's commander with this is very funny. They have to either put it back in the command zone or tuck it into their library and just hope that they draw it. But they probably won't, because Memory, for 4 and double blue, causes each player to shuffle their hand and graveyard into their library, then draw 7 cards. So this is a great draw effect for us. It actually draws it with Memory. Because it's a wheel. Everything we've put in our graveyard is going to come back into our library, and we can draw 7 and hopefully find something good. I would be remiss without mentioning the time that my friend, during a commander game, I put their commander back in their library, and they said, "Oh, I'll just leave it there. I'll just draw it, in a turn or two." And I'm like, "Okay," because it's literally the same piece of cardboard that says they're not going to get to. And then I had them shuffle it away. They were not prepared for it, and they go, "Oh, well, okay." It was a good game. Anyway, Commit to Memory is a lot of fun. And that covers all of our card advantage section. Let's talk now about acceleration, which is, again, shorthanded as ramp here. So, we're running Soul Ring. It's a single generic mana for an artifact that taps for 2 colorless mana. Of course we're running this. It isn't 4 mana or more, but we're not usually hurting for mana to be able to cast a Soul Ring. We only need 1 of our lands, so we've got plenty of those. Arcane Signet, similar situation here. It's 2 generic mana for a rock that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. So in this deck, that means red or blue. This is fine. Totally worth it for an untapped rock that lets us make our colors for 2 mana. Similar are these next 2. Izzet Signet is also a 2 mana rock, and it makes a blue and a red, but we have to pay a mana into it to tap it. So we're tapping 2 mana sources, like the land that we pay this into and the Signet itself, to get 2 mana, but it does filter our mana, and it gives us the colors that we need. Usually we're not hurting on the colors we need in this deck. It's pretty well balanced, a little bit more blue than red, but since Ashling Rhymebound can make 2 mana of whatever color we want, if we're hurting for like red or for blue, Ashling could just shore it up for us usually. But yeah, the Signet is very nice. The one thing that kind of sucks in this deck is that you can't take Ashling's mana and filter it through the Signet, because that would be using that mana to activate an ability, and that mana can only be used to cast spells with mana value 4 or greater. But otherwise, a very strong mana rock for us for just 2 mana. It comes in untapped. Similarly is the Talisman of Creativity. This is a little bit more flexible for us. This is 2 generic mana for an artifact that taps for a colorless. Or we can tap it for a blue or a red if we're willing to let it do a damage to us. The way this normally plays out, in most decks especially, maybe even in this one, although I think it's going to be even easier on us in this one, is that we just tap it for the colorless most of the time. And if we really need to tap it for blue or red, that means in that moment, we're desperate for the specific colored pip that we need in order to cast our spells. It's the break point, like whether we get to cast a spell or not. So at that point, it's worth it to have it do a damage to us. That might be worth it 4, 5, 6, 7 times throughout the game if we're able to cast more spells because of it. And if we don't need it for the colored mana, well, then we just tap it for colorless. No big deal. Great. Talismans are great. Next up is Big Score. Big Score makes us 2 treasures, so it kind of gives us a rebate, but since we're able to use our commander's mana on it, it's sort of like we're taking our commander's mana and filtering it through Big Score into 2 treasures that we can use later. Chandra, we can +1 her to add double red, pretty good. Empowered Auto Generator. This is the first in this section of our many, many 4-drop mana rocks. We've got a bunch of these, more than I would normally put in any deck, but in this deck they just work great for us. For 4 generic mana, we get an artifact that does enter tapped. And if we tap it, we put a charge counter on it, and we make an amount of mana of one color equal to the number of charge counters on it. So the first time we tap this, it's only making 1 mana. But the second time it's making 2, the time after that it's making 3, and so on and so forth. It only gets better for us. Even if we don't need this mana, we just tap it to add more charge counters for it, and every other turn it's going to be making more for us. Very good. This is the only one of these 4-drop rocks that only makes 1 mana, and it only does it once. Next up, I mentioned Firemind Vessel earlier on, 4 generic mana for an artifact that also enters tapped, but we can tap it for 2 mana of different colors. So in our deck, we're going to make a red and a blue, or a red and a blue every time. This is 2 more mana than our Izzet Signet, and it does the same thing for us, and it enters tapped, but we don't have to pay any mana into it, and it's something we can cast with our commander's mana. Keydrain Archive we've seen, it's another 4 mana rock that taps for 2 colorless mana. Pirate's Prize is 4 mana to draw 2 and make a treasure. Ring of the Lucy, or Lucy, not really sure what this is, but it's from Final Fantasy. It's 4 generic mana for a legendary artifact that taps for 2 colorless. We get a lot of these. We can also pay 2, tap, and pay a life to tap a target non-land permanent. This is a great way to, if someone else has got an empowered auto generator, we do this for them during their upkeep. So they're not going to be able to use that mana this turn during that turn in their main phases. Or we hit someone's commander with this, or their biggest, worst attacking creature. We can do that at any time during the turn so that we're able to save ourselves or someone else from being attacked by it. Or we tap down something so that we're able to attack in, or someone else is able to attack in, without having to worry about blocking it. This is a powerful effect that overperforms. Oftentimes we're just tapping this for mana, but having this flexibility here of a second ability, it's pretty nice. But without that, we just got Sisay's Ring. That's what a bunch of these artifacts are. They're 4 mana artifacts that tap for 2 colorless. That's all it is. So, Hedron Archive is a Sisay's Ring. Ring of the Lucy is a Sisay's Ring. Stone Speaker Crystal is a Sisay's Ring. Yeah, but it's a untapped one. Seems fine. We've seen the Sad Robot comes in and Rampant Growths us. Stone Speaker Crystal, it's a Sisay's Ring, and can also deal with graveyards. The Regalia from Final Fantasy is next. This is 4 generic mana for a 4/4 legendary vehicle with crew 1. It has haste, so we could use it right away if we want. And whenever it attacks, we reveal cards from the top of our library until we reveal a land. We put it on the battlefield tapped and the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. So we don't get to choose what it is, but otherwise it's sort of a rampant growth effect, and it might hit one of our non-basics. So you never know. Thran Dynamo is 4 generic mana for an artifact that taps for 3 colorless mana. It's better than Sisay's Ring. That's why there's only one of them. We've seen Unexpected Windfall. It makes 2 treasures in addition to drawing us 2 cards. Ashling's Command can also make us 2 treasures. Gilded Lotus is, I think, our biggest mana rock. It's 5 generic mana for an artifact that taps for 3 mana of any one color. So it is the same as Thran Dynamo, except it costs 1 more, and its mana is colored. So we can use this pretty nicely as well. Amanatu's Augury lets us exile the top 8 cards of our library, but other than just casting our spells, if we see land among them, we can put it on the battlefield and it doesn't come in tapped. And finally, one with the multiverse. Similarly, we can play lands and cast spells from the top of our library, which gives us access to more lands. Pretty good. Yeah, all right. That is our acceleration section. Let's talk now about interaction, which again, we've just shorthanded here as removal. So, Lightning Bolt, we're going to blow things up. Flame of Anor, 5 damage to a creature or destroy an artifact. Imprisoned in the Moon, 2 and a blue for an aura that enchants a creature, land, or planeswalker, and gives the enchanted permanent. It makes it a colorless land with the ability to tap for colorless mana, and it loses all other card types and abilities. So we put this on an opponent's creature or planeswalker. I guess we could hit their land too, but generally we're putting this on an opponent's creature, usually their commander, and now they have 1 more mana source, but that creature is no longer a creature and has no other abilities. So a good way to lock down something that we don't want to have to deal with anymore. Chandra Torch of Defiance can -3 to do 4 damage to a target creature. Johan's Stopgap can bounce an online permanent and draw us a card. Court of Ire at the beginning of our upkeep lets us shock something, and if we're the Monarch, it does 7 damage instead. Fury comes in and does 4 damage divided as we choose among creatures and planeswalkers. Pyreswipe Hawk lets us steal an artifact from an opponent. That seems good. Trumpeting Carnosaur, we can discard to have it do 3 damage to a creature or planeswalker. We've seen Commit, lets us put a spell or non-land permanent from its owner into its owner's library, second for the top. And finally, in this section, we have Hullbreaker Horror, a card I love. 5 and double blue for a 7/8 Kraken Horror with Flash, and it can't be countered. It says whenever we cast a spell, anytime, no matter what, we choose to either return a spell we don't control to its owner's hand or a non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So we're bouncing spells and we're bouncing non-land permanents the same way we would with Commit or with Johann Stopgap, I guess, for the non-land permanents. And we're doing it every time we cast anything. So this can, like, pick off an opponent's entire board if we needed to. Plus, we flash it in. Pretty strong. That is our removal section. Or interaction, I should say. We've already seen our 2 Wraths. Ashling's Command lets us do 2 damage to each creature an opponent controls. And Soulfire Eruption does a lot of damage to a lot of things. Plus, putting cards in exile that we can then cast. Pretty sweet. So that is most of our deck. We have some supplemental sections now that we're going to go over. We've got this Synergy section, which we've seen 1 card from already. Fractured Realm is synergistic because it lets us double the triggers of all of our permanents whenever we've got this in play as well. Twin Flame Travelers, additionally, is 2, a blue and a red for a 3/3 elemental sorcerer with flying. That says if a triggered ability of another elemental you control triggers, it triggers an additional time. So that's not just good for our commander, even though it is great for our commander, giving us even more mana at the outset. We've got this Pyreswipe Hawk is an elemental bird. So when it attacks, it gets +X/+O until end of turn, where X is the greatest mana value among artifacts we control. What if it got +X/+O twice? What if it let us gain control of 1 target artifact for as long as we gain control of an artifact when we expended 6? But we expended 6 twice, and we get that artifact. We got 2 different artifacts. Tanafel Rhyme Speaker, of course, if we cast a spell mana value 4 or greater with the triggers doubled, we get to draw a card 2 times. That's 2 cards. Do we need more cards? Of course we do. Enraged Flamecaster, 2 damage to each opponent twice. That's pretty sweet. So yeah, our synergy section with these Twin Flame Travelers really helps us out, even if it only helps with our commander. Next up is our protection section. We've already seen these. Wondrous Crucible gives all of our permanents Ward 2, and Commit can protect us by taking a spell or a non-land permanent off the board for us, and maybe getting rid of it entirely with Memory. Our last section to supplement ourselves is our discount section, which I keep separate from ramp just because it's not the same thing. Longshot Rebel Bowman, as we've seen, makes all of our non-creature spells cost 1 less to cast, in addition to being a Gutter Snipe for those non-creature spells. So very nice with Longshot. And that covers every spell in our deck. As usual, we're going to go over our land base now. We're starting with, we've got 25 basics we're running, a little bit higher than I normally run for basics. The reason being that in Secrets of Strixhaven, the set that comes out in April, we are getting we're supposed to be getting, I think, the last cards that we need in the Tango Land cycle and in the Bicycle Land cycle. So when those come out, don't know what they're going to be called yet, but I hope they're going to come out and be as inexpensive as they have tended to be. We will be able to get a red-blue Tango Land and a red-blue Bicycle Land, so cut an island and cut a mountain and put those in instead. That gives us more typed lands, so it doesn't change any of our math that cares about typed lands, but it also gives us the ability to cycle the Bicycle Land, maybe have an untapped duel for the Tango Land. Works great for us. We are running Sulphur Falls as our check land. This is a land that comes in tapped unless we control an island or a mountain. Again, we've got 25 of those, and when we upgrade to the Bicycle Land and Tango Land, we will still have 25 of them. And it taps for blue or red. So probably in this deck, it's an untapped duel. Most of the time it will be. I usually say, if you want to upgrade to the Stormcarved Coast slow land, You can. It's often in these decks more likely to come in as an untapped dual, but I think in this one we've just got so many basics that I think Sulphur Falls might be just as good and much more inexpensive. We're running 4 fixing lands. These are the ones I typically run in decks like this. So Command Tower is an untapped land that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, just like Arcane Signet does. So this is an untapped dual all the time. Of course we want this. It makes blue, it makes red, we love it. We'll take a tapped dual though. Path of Ancestry is a land that enters tapped and has the same text that Command Tower does. However, it also says, if we use its mana to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we scry 1. So this is a little interesting in this deck, because our commander has 3 different types. Ashling Rekindled is an elemental sorcerer on the front side and an elemental wizard on the back. So does that mean that Path of Ancestry gives us a scry every time we cast any elemental? Yes, it does. What about any wizard or any sorcerer? Not necessarily. The way this works, rule-wise, is it matters which face is up for Ashling when we use the mana from Path of Ancestry. Ashling's front face is up when Ashling is in any zone other than the battlefield, and on the battlefield, Ashling has whichever face up that we have up at the time. So we have some wizards in this deck. We have 3 other wizards in this deck. So if we play one of those while Ashling Rhinebound is face up, we're going to get the scry, if we use the mana from Path of Ancestry to do so. But if Ashling Rekindled is up, we will not get the scry for wizards, and we will get the scry for the other 2 sorcerers we have in this deck. But at all times, no matter whether or not Ashling is in play, we're going to get the scry for any elemental. And that includes Ashling herself. Because of course Ashling shares card types with herself, with creature types with herself. So Myriad Landscape is next. This is a tap land that taps for colorless, but we can also pay 2 and tap it and sack it to search our library for up to 2 basic lands that share a land type. So in this deck, 2 mountains or 2 islands, and then put them on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So it's sort of a double rampant growth. And even though this comes in tapped, and it requires us to pay mana into it, and the lands we find are coming in tapped, it does put 2 lands into play when we only use 1 land drop to play the Myriad Landscape. So it is technically ramp in our land base. We love ramp in this deck, and we often have enough mana left over to do this, since we're going to be able to use mana from our land base to activate Myriad Landscape, since we already have 2 mana from Ashling Rhinebound that we can put toward our spells. So pretty good for us. Similarly is Temple of the False God. I know not everyone loves this land, but it's an untapped land that taps for 2 colorless mana, like Soul Ring. It's a soul land. It just can't be activated unless we control 4 other lands or more, so 5 or more including itself. That means early on, maybe this isn't that great. If your opening hand is just a basic mountain and a Temple of the False God, you probably want a mulligan. You definitely want to start with a blue source and a red source, at least one of which should be untapped when you play this deck. But Temple of the False God can really help us. It is, again, more than 1 mana for a single land drop that doesn't bounce anything back to our hand. So yeah, Temple of the False God is worth running in this deck when we have so many big things we want to get out. Next up, we have a series of good lands for this. Shivan Reef is our pain land. This is just like the Talisman of Creativity, but on a land, an untapped land. So everything I said about the Talisman is true here as well. Tap it for colored mana when we really need to, otherwise tap it for colorless. It's worth the damage. If you wanted to upgrade this, you could probably upgrade to a Steam Vents Shockland. That may not be doing any damage to you at all, and if it does, it's only 2 damage when it first comes in, so it comes in untapped. That's a good option for you there. We're running Riverglide Pathway because I love the pathways, even though they are getting a little pricier these days. I hope they get these reprinted soon. The Riverglide Pathway is a land that comes in untapped and taps for a blue, unless we play it on its backside, in which case it is Lava Glide Pathway and it taps for a red. Both sides are untapped. It's exactly what we need whenever we play it. Sounds good. We're running this Reveal land, which is the Frostboil Snarl from Strixhaven originally. As it enters, we can reveal an island or mountain from our hand. If we don't do that, it comes in tapped. So oftentimes a tap land, but many times, since we're drawing so many cards in this deck, we're going to just have a basic or 2 in our hand as well. So we play out the Snarl, so not because we really need an untapped dual, but just so it's untapped at all. And it taps for blue or red. What might be a good upgrade to this is the Riverpire Verge of the Verge land cycle that came out in Ether Drift and whatever else. It came out at Duskmorn. There you go. Temple of Epiphany is our scry land. This is a tap land that when it enters, we scry 1. So a guaranteed scry rather than the repeatable but conditional scry from Path of Ancestry. And otherwise, it's a tap land that taps for our 2 colors, just like Path of Ancestry. If you wanted to upgrade this to a Thundering Falls Surveil land, you sure could. But again, all these upgrades I'm suggesting are much more expensive than the lands we've put in here, and these lands work almost as well, or sometimes just as well. Finally, we have 4 utility lands. We're running Castle Vantress. Originally from Throne of Eldraine, this is a land that comes in tapped unless we control an island, and we've got lots of islands in the deck. It taps for blue, and we can pay 2 and double blue, and tap it to scry 2. Kind of expensive as a way to scry, just 5 mana, so 4 in the castle itself. But in case we're trying to dig for something in particular, and maybe we're, having that moment that happens in any Magic player's career where you are just sort of not being able to get the lands or the spells rather that you need. Maybe you're hitting a big pocket of lands. And if you're not able to cast things, then you sure can't use Ashling Rhinebound's mana to cast things as well. So Castle Vantress helps us filter the top of our library to get where we need to get to. Demolition Field is in here because at the power level I build these decks, most pods that play with these kind of decks don't take kindly to people blowing up their lands, and that's fine. But you do have to have one answer, at least just one answer in your deck for a problematic land. Like I usually say, if someone's got a Rogue's Passage to make their commander unblockable in their Voltron deck because their commander is huge, or if they have a Glacial Chasm that's stopping other opponents from damaging them, or a Maze of Ith from stopping them from attacking in. Any non-basic land that's causing our game plan to suffer, or the controller's game plan to be supercharged, is fair game to remove like any other threat or answer. So Demolition Field is our one answer to that. This is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap and sack it to destroy a non-basic land that an opponent controls. That opponent then gets to search their library for a basic land and put it on the battlefield untapped, and then shuffle, and so do we. So neither we nor they are down a land, but whatever was problematic is out of the way, and both of us have lands in play that we could tap for mana right away if we needed to. Pretty good. Desolate Lighthouse is next. This is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 1, a blue, and a red, and tap it to draw a card and then discard a card. This is looting, as opposed to the rummaging that Ashling's front side lets us do. If we need more card selection, sometimes it's worth it. So there we go. And Riptide Laboratory is next. This is our last land. It's untapped and it taps for colorless, or we can pay 1 and a blue and tap it to return target wizard we control to its owner's hand. Ashling Rhinebound, the blue side, the back side of our commander, is a wizard. So Riptide Laboratory is a great way for us to bounce Ashling if someone tries to mess with her. If someone tries to put an Imprisoned in the Moon on her, or an Oubliette. I don't know who's playing with Oubliette, but maybe they are. Or just remove it some other way. We want to use Riptide Laboratory to bounce Ashling and then replay her as of her front side, to be fair, but without paying the mana cost, the mana tax for us casting our commander from the command zone again. So Riptide Laboratory is a good way to protect her in those ways. And that about sums it up. Again, I'm releasing new Lorwyn Eclipsed commander decks every Thursday through mid-March when the Ninja Turtle set drops. So let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a specific commander or deck style. There's only one more before that happens, so let me know quick, I guess. But yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure to like and subscribe. Good grief. Remember to ring the bell if you want to be notified when I post another video. And remember most of all that magic is fun. You should play more Magic.